She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even slam the door. She just left the ring on the kitchen counter and disappeared into the Seoul night like she was never his to begin with. And the most terrifying part? He let her. Now, 30 days later, Jin Tae-hyun, the man who makes grown men beg on their knees, just found out she's carrying his child, and someone else found out first. If you've ever watched a man realize too late what he threw away, stay until the end. Like this video, drop your city in the comments, and let me see how far this story travels. The kitchen light was still on. That was the first thing Tae-hyun noticed when he came home at 2 in the morning. The pale yellow glow bleeding under the kitchen door. The kind of light Nia always left burning when she couldn't sleep, when her mind was working too fast for her body to follow. He had walked past that glow 100 times without stopping. Tonight, he stopped. The ring sat in the center of the counter, not near the edge, not dropped carelessly beside the sink, centered, deliberate. The way Nia did everything, with intention, with a quiet precision that he had spent 3 years mistaking for passivity. The gold band caught the light and held it, and Tae-hyun stood in the doorway of his own kitchen for a long moment, his suit jacket still on, his phone still in his hand, unable to move. He had expected her anger, had been bracing for it since the night of the announcement, the formal dinner at the Seo Consortium headquarters, where he had stood beside Chairman Seo Kyung-chul and smiled for photographs while Nia sat 3 rows back in the audience, understanding everything in real time. He had expected tears, accusations, the kind of screaming that shook walls. He had prepared a version of himself capable of weathering all of it, a version that could absorb her pain and remain standing. That version of himself had an answer for every charge she could level. But she hadn't leveled any. She had come home that night, walked straight to the bedroom, and changed out of her dress without speaking. He had stood in the hallway and asked her name twice, and she had answered both times. Yes, she heard him. Yes, she was fine. In a voice so flat and controlled it scared him more than any scream would have. And then she had slept, or appeared to sleep, while he sat on the edge of the bed and watched the ceiling and told himself she would be calmer in the morning. She was calmer in this morning. She was calm every morning after that. She ate breakfast. She answered his questions. She moved through the mansion with the same quiet grace she had always carried, and she did not fight him, and she did not beg him, and she did not give him a single opening to defend himself. And then one day, she was gone. He picked up the ring. It was lighter than he remembered. He turned it over in his fingers. This small circle of gold he had chosen himself, had placed on her hand in a ceremony that felt like the first honest thing he had done in years. And he set it back down because he didn't know what else to do with it. His head of security, Kang Dae-wook, appeared in the corridor behind him. The man moved silently. 30 years in and out of intelligence work had burned every unnecessary sound out of him. He was 53, lean, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing and revealed less. He had served the Hanul Syndicate since Tae-hyun's father ran it, and he was the only person in the building who could enter a room without being announced. She took nothing, Dae-wook said. Tae-hyun didn't turn around. I see that. The closet is full. Her books, her things, all still here. I know. A pause. She left clean. Tae-hyun finally turned. Dae-wook's face was unreadable, which was normal. What wasn't normal was the slight tension around the older man's jaw. The tells were small with Dae-wook, almost microscopic, but Tae-hyun had been reading them since he was 19 years old. Something was being held back, something already calculated. Find her, Tae-hyun said. And when I do? Make sure she's safe, that's all. Dae-wook nodded once, turned, and disappeared back into the corridor. His footsteps made no sound at all. Tae-hyun looked at the ring one more time. Then he turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs to his study and poured 3 fingers of whiskey he didn't drink and sat in the dark until morning came. The Hanul Syndicate operated out of 3 official addresses and a dozen unofficial ones. Its legitimate face was a mid-size holding company called Hanul Capital, which managed real estate portfolios, hospitality investments, and a logistics arm that moved goods through 6 provinces. Its other face, the one that actually generated power, was older, more patient, and built on the kind of agreements that were never written down. Taehyun had inherited both faces at 27 when his father died of a cardiac event in the back of a company car, and he had spent the following decade reinforcing every wall of the structure his father had built and adding walls of his own. He was 37 now. He had not taken a day of personal leave in 4 years. He had not attended a social event that wasn't tactically necessary in longer than that. He had precisely 3 people in his life whose opinions he considered before acting: Dae-wook, his mother Madame Han Mi-ran, and until 30 days ago, Naya. She had come into his world sideways, not the way women usually entered the circles he moved in, not through introduction, not through calculation, not with an agenda folded behind a smile. She had been doing pro bono legal consulting work for a nonprofit that operated in the Mapo district, and she had showed up to a community board meeting where he was present because one of his legitimate businesses had a zoning dispute that the nonprofit was contesting. She had argued her position clearly, calmly, and without flinching, even after she recognized who he was, especially after she recognized who he was. He had found out later that she had asked around about him before the meeting, and that knowing what she knew, she had walked in and argued against his interests anyway. He had found that unreasonable and fascinating in equal measure. 3 months later, they were having dinner. 6 months after that, she was the first person he had voluntarily told things to. Not information, but actual things. The kind that didn't have strategic value and couldn't be weaponized. Small things. Old things. The way his father's study had smelled like cigarettes and cold coffee. The specific shade of guilt that lived in his chest when he thought about the life the work had cost him. She listened the way she did everything else. Carefully, completely, without performing it. He had proposed 18 months into it. She had said yes with her eyes before the word came out of her mouth. And now the kitchen light was off and the ring was on the counter, and he was sitting in the dark pretending to read reports he couldn't focus on, and somewhere in Seoul, Nia was sleeping in a bed that wasn't in his house. Well, 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Then the month turned. Dae-wook's people tracked her to a neighborhood in Mapo, which made sense, which almost made Taehyun exhale, because it was the place she knew best in this city, the place where she had built her own life before his world consumed it. She was staying with a friend, a woman named Imani Brooks, who had been in Seoul for 6 years doing development work, and who, according to Dae-wook's file, had no ties to any competing organization and no apparent reason to be a threat. Just a friend. Just a woman giving another woman a floor to sleep on while she figured out what came next. Taehyun's surveillance protocol was careful, distant, and non-intrusive. He had given those instructions himself. He did not want her watched in any way that felt like surveillance, which was an absurd distinction. He understood that, but he drew it anyway. He wanted to know she was safe. He did not want her to feel hunted. He did not reach out. He wrote 3 messages and deleted all of them. He drove past the Mapo district twice at night and turned around both times before he got close. He told himself he was giving her space. He told himself it was respect. What it actually was, he understood on the 31st day when Dae-wook came into his office and closed the door, which he only did when what he was about to say could not survive open air. She visited a clinic, Dae-wook said. He set a thin folder on the desk. Private practice in Seocho. Prenatal specialist. She used a different name. Taehyun didn't move. The appointment was 3 days ago. I only have partial confirmation, but enough to be certain. The folder sat on the desk between them. Taehyun looked at it for a long time without touching it. How far along, he said. His voice came out level. He had no idea how. Based on the timing, the clinic's intake records suggest early second trimester, 12, maybe 13 weeks. 12 weeks. He did the math without meaning to, the way his mind always worked through calculations before his emotions caught up, and the number landed somewhere behind his sternum and stayed there. 12 weeks meant she had known before she left. Maybe not for certain, maybe just suspected, but she had known something was changing inside her body, and she had still put the ring on the counter and walked out into the Seoul night and not told him. She had made a decision about what he deserved to know. Dae-wook was watching him carefully, not the way he watched threats, the way he watched things that could fracture. Who else has this? Taehyun said. Currently, just us. But Seo's intelligence network is active. They've been monitoring your personal situation since the announcement. It's only a matter of time before... How much time? Days. Maybe less. Taehyun stood up. He walked to the window. 37 stories below, Seoul moved in its permanent restless rush. Taxis and delivery bikes and pedestrians who had no idea that in the building above them, the man who ran a significant portion of the city's underground economy had just discovered that everything he had convinced himself he didn't need was now growing in a clinic in Seocho under a false name. She used a different name, he said, almost to himself. Yes, she was protecting herself from me. Dae-wook was quiet for a moment. She was protecting the child. That landed differently. Tae-hyun pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass and watched the city, and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not guilt, which he was familiar with, not regret, which he had learned to metabolize efficiently, but something older and simpler and much harder to manage. Something that felt like fear without an enemy attached to it. He had made a choice. He had looked at Nia and looked at the Seo alliance and chosen the alliance with the clean certainty of a man who believed in the architecture of power over the chaos of the personal. He had been wrong. He had known he was wrong the moment the ring wasn't on her finger at breakfast the next day, and he had managed the knowledge the way he managed everything, by staying busy, by staying cold, by telling himself the grief was temporary and the strategic gain was permanent. But the child changed the geometry of everything. Get me everything on Seo's intelligence operation, he said. Current personnel, communication channels, who's running field assets right now. Already compiling. And Dae-wook. He turned from the window. Nobody else hears about this. Not the council, not the inner circle, not my mother. This stays between us until I figure out what I'm doing. Dae-wook picked up the folder. Understood. He paused at the door. For what it's worth. It's not. The older man almost smiled. She's worth the trouble you're about to cause yourself. Then he was gone, and Tae-hyun was alone with 37 stories of soul beneath him and the specific weight of a choice he couldn't unchoose. Nia had not cried either. That was the thing she couldn't explain to Amani, who had held her hands across the kitchen table that first night and waited for the breakdown with patient, careful eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen real grief and knew how to sit inside it. But the breakdown hadn't come. What came instead was something quieter and more troubling, a clarity so complete it felt surgical. She had known for a long time. That was the honest part, the part that hurt worse than the betrayal itself. She had watched Tae-hyun navigate the Seo negotiations for months, had seen the shape of the deal forming, had understood what an alliance with the Seo consortium would require. A political marriage, a merger of dynasties built on money and leverage, and the kind of bloodless violence that wore a suit and shook hands in hotel lobbies. She had even asked him directly once, sitting on the floor of his study at midnight while he worked, whether he would ever make a choice that cost him something real. He had looked at her over the edge of his laptop and said, "I make hard choices every day." She had not said, "That's not what I mean." She had said goodnight and gone to bed. She should have left then. She understood that now, in the small apartment on the 4th floor of a building in Mappo that smelled like instant coffee and Amani's lavender soap. She should have left the moment she understood that when he said hard choices, he meant strategic ones, not the kind that cost the parts of yourself that actually mattered. The baby was 11 weeks along when she left. She hadn't been certain yet. The test was positive, but early, the numbers uncertain, the clinic appointment still 2 weeks away. She had left anyway. She had left because she couldn't carry a child inside a house where she already felt like furniture, present, functional, and fundamentally unregarded. She sat on the narrow balcony of Imani's apartment in the early evenings and watched Mappo go about its business. Street vendors and school kids and old men playing baduk outside the corner store. And she breathed slow and she held the secret of the baby in her chest like something that needed protecting from the cold. Amani knew. Amani had known almost immediately because Amani had the specific intelligence of someone who paid attention to other people without making a performance of it. "You're going to tell him eventually," Amani said one evening. She wasn't asking. "I don't know that," Nia said. "You know that." He made his choice. He made a bad choice. That's different. Nia looked at the street below. A woman was scolding a child who had dropped something, and the child's face cycled through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: guilt, defiance, surrender. She recognized all 3. "He runs an empire," she said. "That child is going to be born into whatever he is. Whatever his world is, that child is already in his world, whether you tell him or not. Nia didn't answer. Amani went back inside. The street vendor below was wrapping fish in newspaper with practiced speed, his hands moving without thought, the motions so repeated they had become automatic. She pressed her palm flat against her stomach, just for a moment, just to feel the ordinary warmth of her own skin, the barely there suggestion of a life beginning to take up space. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure she would be. But she understood even then that ready didn't have much to do with it. So Kyung-chul was 61 years old and had the kind of patience that came from watching other men make mistakes and waiting to benefit from them. He had built the CO consortium over 4 decades through a combination of legal acumen, calculated ruthlessness, and an almost supernatural ability to identify what other people needed most and withhold it until the price was right. The alliance with the Hanul Syndicate had been his idea. Tae-hyun had come to the table believing he was the one initiating. That was the first thing Seo had allowed him to believe, because men like Tae-in Osmatsuoski Hyun operated better when they thought they were leading the dance. In reality, Seo had been positioning for the merger for 18 months, and the political marriage, his granddaughter to a figurehead from the Hanul inner circle, was a mechanism designed to create binding legal ties between the two organizations' legitimate arms, which would in turn provide cover for the operations that lived beneath them. He had one condition that he had not stated at any negotiating table, but that his intelligence chief, a precise man named Director O, had understood from the beginning. The arrangement required Tae-hyun's complete personal commitment to the CO alliance, a competing emotional attachment, a foreign woman, a prior relationship, any form of alternative loyalty, was an operational liability. When Director O placed the surveillance report on his desk, Seo read it twice and set it down. "Pregnant," he said. "Confirmed through the clinic, early 2nd trimester." Tae-hyun knows? His surveillance identified the clinic visit. He knows. Seo leaned back. Outside his office window, the Han River moved in its slow, permanent way, gray-green under the overcast sky, indifferent to everything happening on its banks. "If there is a legitimate heir," he said, "the political marriage becomes complicated. Tae-hyun has legal grounds to restructure the succession terms. The lawyers would argue for years. The lawyers would argue forever. I don't have forever." He picked up the report again. "She's living in Mapo." "Yes, a friend's apartment. Minimal security. She has no idea we're watching." "I want her gone from Korea," Seo said. Quietly, with enough lead time that Tae-hyun cannot respond. Director O's face remained professionally neutral. "Gone. Gone. Not harmed unless necessary. I want her scared enough to leave on her own. A warning first. If the warning fails..." He set the report down again, aligning it carefully with the edge of his desk. "Then we escalate." Director O nodded and picked up the report. He was almost at the door when Seo spoke again. "She's Nigerian," Seo said. "She has a family somewhere. Find out where." The warning came on a Tuesday. Nia was in the neighborhood market 3 blocks from the apartment, the one that opened before dawn and ran past midnight and smelled like sesame oil and cold stone floors. She had come for produce, for the specific pleasure of handling ordinary things, the weight of a persimmon in her palm, the rough skin of a winter radish, the predictable transactional rhythm of picking up something real and carrying it home. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. She had been ignoring unknown numbers for a week, since Imani had warned her that Tae-hyun's people were quietly circling, but something in the quality of the silence before the connection completed made her answer. The voice on the other end was male set, Korean accent, educated, deliberate. He did not raise his voice once. He told her that he knew where she lived. He told her he knew she was pregnant and that the child belonged to Jin Tae-hyun. He told her that certain parties had strong interests in the current political arrangement between the Hanul Syndicate and the Seo Consortium, and that her presence in Seoul, and specifically the child she was carrying, represented a complication those parties could not accept. He told her to leave Korea. He gave her 72 hours. He told her that if she chose not to leave, the complications she would face would be of a kind she was not equipped to navigate. He said this without threat in his voice, without any particular emphasis. He said it the way a man states a fact he considers obvious. Then he hung up. Nia stood between the vegetable stalls with persimmons in one hand and her phone in the other and let the market noise wash over her. The shouting vendors, the shrieking children, the metallic scrape of crates across wet concrete, and she breathed through her nose, slow and even, and she did not allow herself to fall apart in a market in Mapo at 10 in the morning. She finished buying the vegetables. She walked home. She set the bag on Amani's kitchen counter and sat down in one of the wooden chairs and put both hands flat on the table and looked at them. Amani appeared from the hallway, took one look at her, sat down across from her without speaking. "Someone just called me," Nia said. Amani waited. "They told me to leave Korea." She paused. "They know about the baby." The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Amani's face went through something, not panic, but a rapid internal recalculation. "How many people know about the baby?" Amani said carefully. "You, the clinic, and apparently whoever just called me." "And Taehyun?" Nia was quiet. "Nia, I don't know," she said. "I don't know what he knows." Amani leaned forward. "This isn't a coincidence. Someone connected to him, or connected to people around him, just threatened you. That means you're not invisible anymore. That means whatever you thought you were doing by keeping this quiet, I know. It's not working. I know." Nia took a breath. "They want me out of Korea." "Are you going?" The question hung between them. Outside, a motorbike backfired on the street below. The fluorescent light above the kitchen table hummed its constant, indifferent hum. "No," Nia said. Amani nodded slowly. "Okay." She stood up and reached for her phone. "Then we need to think about what comes next." What came next arrived faster than either of them expected. Dae-wook was in Taehyun's office when the intercept came through, a fragment of a communication flagged by the monitoring system that tracked CO Consortium's known intelligence channels. It was partial, encoded, but enough. A woman in Mapo. A phone warning. A 72-hour window. Dae-wook read it twice, then once more, and walked directly from the monitoring room to Taehyun's office and closed the door. He put the transcript on the desk. Taehyun read it standing up. His face didn't move. That was the thing about him. The more serious the information, the stiller he became, as if the body understood that any energy spent on reaction was energy stolen from response. He read it a second time. Then he said, "When did this call happen?" "Approximately 40 minutes ago." "She received this call 40 minutes ago, and nobody told me for 40 minutes. The intercept takes time to process and fix that." He set the transcript down. "Who made the call?" "We're running voice analysis now. Likely Director O's field section. It matches their operational pattern. Indirect, nonspecific, deniable." "And the 72 hours?" "Started when the call ended." Taehyun turned to the window. Seoul. His city, his inheritance, the thing he had bent the first 3 decades of his adult life toward maintaining. He looked at it the way you look at something you've been gripping so long, your hands have forgotten what it feels like to open. "She won't leave," he said. Quiet, almost to himself. "Sir, she won't leave. That's not how she is." He turned back. "Seo knows that, which means the call wasn't actually meant to make her go. It was meant to make her panic, to make her reach out to me, to give them a chance to monitor the contact and find out how I respond." Dae-wook was quiet for a moment. "Or it was a first step. And the second step is already being arranged." Taehyun picked up the transcript and folded it with precision and put it in his inside jacket pocket. "Get me a car, not the convoy. 1 car, 1 driver, and you. Just us. And Jae-min." His youngest field operative, 26, fast, loyal, and capable of making himself invisible in a crowd. 3 people, no armor, nothing that announces itself. Dae-wook's expression shifted slightly. "The council will expect The council expects what I tell them to expect." He was already moving toward the door. "Tell them I'm in a strategy meeting. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. I need to get to Mapo before Seo's people move from warning to action. If Seo finds out you're going personally, then Seo finds out." He He stopped at the door and looked back, and for a moment the 37 floors and the city below and the years of careful constructed power all fell away, and what remained was something much older and much simpler. "He threatened my child, Dae-wook." The older man met his eyes. "I'm going," Tae-hyun said. And then he was in the corridor, moving fast, and the estate closed behind him like a held breath. And somewhere in Mappo, Nia Okafor was sitting at a kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood, trying to decide what kind of woman she was going to be in the next 72 hours. And she had no idea that the decision had already been made for her, by a phone call she hadn't expected, and a man she had stopped believing in, who was currently moving through Seoul at speed, not as a boss, not as a king, but as something he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. A man running towards the thing he had broken. A man who did not yet know whether running was going to be enough. The car turned south toward Mappo. The city blurred past the windows. Rain was beginning, just at the edges of the sky, the particular gray that preceded Seoul downpours, slow and inevitable and absolute. Dae-wook watched the street ahead and kept his thoughts to himself. Tae-hyun watched the rain begin and thought about a ring on a kitchen counter and the specific silence of a woman who has already made her decision and is simply waiting to see if you'll make yours. He had no plan. He had no prepared argument. He had no leverage and no strategy and no angle. He had just the truth of what he'd done and the fact of what was growing in a clinic's records under a false name and the 72 hours that were already bleeding away. And somewhere in Mappo, in a fourth-floor apartment that smelled like lavender soap and instant coffee, Nia's phone was about to ring again. This time, it would be a different number. This time, she would not answer. And this time, it wouldn't matter, because he was already on his way. The rain hit Mappo before the car did. It came in fast, the kind of Seoul rain that didn't build gradually but arrived all at once, like a decision already made, sheeting across the narrow streets and turning the gutters into rivers and driving the street vendors under their awnings in a single collective flinch. Tae-hyun watched it through the passenger window and said nothing. Dae-wook drove. Jaemin sat in the back with his hands loose in his lap and his eyes moving across every surface they passed, cataloging, assessing, filing. The specific hypervigilance of a young man who had learned early that inattention was the most common way people got killed. Nobody spoke for 11 minutes. Tae-hyun knew because he counted. It was something he did when his mind was working too fast for language. Reduced everything to numbers, to sequences, to the kind of information that didn't require interpretation. 11 minutes. 3 kilometers. The apartment building Dae-wook's people had identified was on a side street off the main Mappo arterial, 4 stories of concrete and aluminum-framed windows, the kind of building that had been functional in 1987 and had aged without grace since then. Nothing remarkable about it. That was probably why she had chosen the neighborhood, or why Amani had chosen it, which amounted to the same thing. "Stop here," Tae-hyun said. Dae-wook pulled the car to the curb half a block short of the building. The rain hammered the roof. Through the windshield, the street was empty except for a produce cart abandoned by its owner, a tarp half draped over a pile of winter squash, the orange-yellow skin slick and bright in the gray light. "4th floor," Dae-wook said. "Unit 412, east-facing windows." Tae-hyun looked at the building. The lights were on in the 4th floor windows. He could see the particular warm tone of a kitchen lamp, the kind of light that meant someone was home, awake, probably at a table, probably exactly where Dae-wook's intercept suggested she'd been when she got the call. 40 minutes ago, she had answered a phone and a man had told her to disappear or face consequences. 40 minutes ago, Tae-hyun had been sitting in his office reading investment reports and pretending the world made the same kind of sense it always had. "Seo's people," he said. "Are they on this street?" "Not yet. 2 vehicles were logged entering the Mappo district approximately 20 minutes ago. Likely reconnaissance. They're not moving to the building yet." "How long before they do?" "Hard to say. Could be waiting for dark. Could be waiting for confirmation that she's refusing to comply." "She's refusing." He said it with certainty. Because he knew her. He knew the specific quality of her stubbornness. Not the hot, reactive kind, but the cold, structural kind, the kind that had been built over a lifetime of being told to accommodate and choosing not to. She had refused things far simpler than this. He opened the car door. "Sir." Dae-wook's voice. Not alarmed, Daewoo didn't do alarmed, but carrying a specific weight. I'm going up. If Seo's reconnaissance sees you entering the building, then they see me entering the building. He looked back. The rain had already soaked through the shoulder of his jacket. Stay on the vehicles. The moment they move toward this building, I need to know. Jaemin was already reaching for his door handle. Not you, Taehyun said. Stay with Daewoo. I go up alone. Jaemin's hand stopped. He looked at Daewoo. Daewoo gave a single small nod that meant let him. Taehyun walked through the rain toward the building entrance. He didn't run. He had learned a long time ago that running announced itself, that the way you moved through space was the first thing people read about you, and he had spent years learning to move like a man who had nowhere he needed to be urgently, even when he was moving very fast indeed. The lobby door was unlocked. He took the stairs. Pasha, Nia heard the knock at exactly the moment Amani was saying they should call someone. 3 knocks. Quiet. Spaced evenly. Not the knock of someone who wasn't sure they wanted to be there. The knock of someone who had decided completely and was simply announcing the decision. Amani stopped mid-sentence. Both women looked at the door. Expecting anyone? Amani said very quietly. No. Imani stood up. She was not a small woman, and she carried herself with the specific physicality of someone who had worked in unstable environments and understood that presence was its own form of protection. She moved toward the door. Don't, Nia said. Imani stopped. The knock came again. 3 times, same rhythm, then a voice, low, controlled. Speaking English, which meant it was specifically for Nia. A choice, a small, deliberate act of reaching across whatever had been severed. Nia, it's me. The kitchen went very still. The fluorescent light hummed. Somewhere below, the rain was working its way into the street drains, the sound of it constant and gray and indifferent. Amani turned around and looked at Nia with an expression that contained an entire conversation in it. Nia looked back. Neither of them spoke. Nia stood up. She crossed the small living room to the door and stopped with her hand not quite touching the handle. How did you find me? She said. Through the door, not opening it. A pause. Daewoo. Of course. Nia, how long have you known where I was? Another pause. Longer this time, the kind of pause that was its own answer. A few weeks, he said. She closed her eyes, breathed through it. And you waited. I was trying to give you space. You were watching me. Her voice didn't shake. She had practiced this without knowing she was practicing it, had spent weeks building the architecture of this conversation in the back of her mind. For weeks. You had people watching me and you didn't tell me, and you call that giving me space. It wasn't surveillance. I needed to know you were safe. I needed you to leave me alone. I know. And here you are. Someone called you today, he said. The quality of his voice changed. Not softer, not harder, but more direct, stripped of the careful management she had always been able to hear underneath his words. 72 hours. I need you to understand what that means. I understand exactly what it means. Then you understand why I'm here. She opened her eyes. Her hand found the handle. She stood like that for a moment, hand on the handle, forehead almost touching the door, the thin painted wood between her and everything she had walked away from. She opened it. Usha. He looked like he'd walked through the rain deliberately. His jacket was soaked through at the shoulders, his hair flattened, a thin line of water tracking down the side of his face from his temple to his jaw. He was not wearing the face he wore in public. The composed, managed, authoritative face she had spent 3 years learning to read around. He was wearing something rawer than that, something that looked uncomfortably like a man who did not have a plan. She hated that it was harder to be angry at this version of him. She stepped back from the door. He came in. Imani was standing near the kitchen entrance, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that communicated clearly and without words that she had a specific opinion of him, and it was not flattering. He looked at Imani. I'm sorry to be here unannounced. Are you? Imani said. Flat. Not quite hostile. Precisely calibrated. Yes. Nia, Imani said, not looking away from him. You want me to stay or go? Nia looked at Tae-hyun. He was looking at her. Not at Imani, not at the apartment, just at her, with the kind of focused attention she had spent 3 years wanting and the last 30 days trying to stop missing. Stay, Nia said. Something moved across his face. He accepted it. Sit down, Nia said. She did not ask it like an invitation. He sat in one of the wooden kitchen chairs. She stayed standing. The apartment was small enough that standing gave her nothing in terms of actual space, but it gave her something else. The right to move, the right to leave, a body that wasn't committed to anything. Talk, she said. He put both hands flat on the table. She recognized the gesture. It was what he did when he was choosing honesty over strategy, clearing the surface of himself so there was nothing to hide behind. The man who called you works for Seo Kyung-chul, he said. Director O's intelligence section. They've been monitoring my personal situation since the announcement. Your personal situation, she said. You mean me? Yes? And the baby? He held her gaze. Yes. How long have you known about the baby? Since yesterday. The number hit her somewhere specific. Yesterday. 24 hours. He had known for 24 hours and had not come, had not called, had not reached through any of the dozen channels he could have used to reach her, and then a phone call from a stranger had been what finally moved him off his throne and across Seoul in the rain. She wanted to say that out loud. She could feel the shape of it in her throat, but she also understood with the kind of clarity that came from a month of very quiet and very deliberate thinking that saying it would be for her own satisfaction and not for any useful purpose. And she had made herself a promise the night she packed that she would not fight battles that weren't worth the energy. What does Seo want? She said. He wants the child not to exist. He said it bluntly, without softening it. She gave him 1 point for that. A legitimate heir complicates the succession terms of the alliance agreement. The political marriage, the arrangement he designed, depends on me having no prior competing claim. If I have a child, if you have a child, she said, then you have a reason to renegotiate. Yes. Or to walk away entirely. He was quiet for a moment. Yes. She looked at him for a long time, the rain against the windows. Imani very still in the kitchen doorway. The fluorescent hum above them, relentless and indifferent. Is that why you're here? She said. To renegotiate. No. Then why? Because someone threatened you. He said it without decoration. Because someone called you and gave you 72 hours, and I know what happens at the end of 72 hours when Seo decides a warning hasn't worked. And you're carrying my child and I... He stopped. His jaw tightened briefly, the muscles working against something. I'm here because I should have been here a month ago and I wasn't, and I don't have a good enough reason for that. The silence stretched. Nia looked at her hands. She had a habit, when she was deciding something, of going very still. Not the stillness of someone shut down, but the stillness of someone processing at full capacity. You need to leave, she said. He didn't move. Tae-hyun, I need you to leave this apartment. I'm not leaving you here with... I didn't ask what you were willing to do. Her voice finally got an edge in it. Not loud, not sharp, but present. Real. I'm telling you that you being here does not make me safer. It makes me a target. If Seo's people are watching this building and they see you walk in, they know I didn't take the warning. They know you've made contact. Everything escalates. He looked at her. You know I'm right, she said. He did. She could see it. The specific quality of a man who has run the calculation and arrived at an answer he doesn't like. I'm not going far, he said. I don't care where you go. Nia. Quiet. Just her name. Just the way he said it when he wasn't performing anything. Don't, she said. Not right now, please. He stood up. He looked at Imani, who looked steadily back at him. He looked at Nia one more time. There was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Or maybe she had seen it and hadn't known what to call it. It wasn't guilt, which she knew the shape of in him. It was something less managed than guilt. Something closer to the ground. He walked to the door, hand on the handle. Then he stopped without turning around. There's a clinic record under the name Seo's people found, he said. I need you to know. I didn't access the file. Dae-wook told me the minimum. I didn't look at anything you hadn't chosen to tell me. She didn't answer. He opened the door and left. Amani waited until his footsteps faded on the stairs. Then she crossed the room and sat in the chair he had just vacated and looked at Nia with an expression that was equal parts compassion and exasperation. "Well," Imani said. "Don't. I'm just Imani. I know. Don't." Imani picked up the abandoned mug of cold tea from the table and held it in both hands and said nothing. The rain kept coming. Somewhere below them, a car engine turned over and idled and didn't move. Wak. Madame Han-mi-ran called at 9:17 in the evening. Taehyun was sitting in the car, 3 buildings down from the apartment, the engine off, the windows fogging slowly. Dae-wook had done 3 slow circuits of the surrounding streets and identified one of the CO reconnaissance vehicles. A gray sedan parked near the far corner, engine running, 2 occupants. They were watching the building, but not moving, waiting for something. He answered his mother's call on the second ring. "You're in Mapo," she said. Not a question. "How do you know that?" "Because you're not in your office, and you're not at the estate, and the only reason you would be in Mapo is her." A pause. "Dae-wook told me nothing. I worked it out myself." "Of course you did." "The baby," she said. Quiet. "Is it true?" He looked at the building, the 4th-floor windows, the specific warm light still burning. "Yes," he said. His mother was silent for a long moment. He heard her exhale, a careful, measured breath, the kind she took when she was managing her own feelings in real time. "I see," she said finally. "Mother, I told you." Her voice was controlled, but the control was costing her something. "I told you that what you were doing with the CO arrangement would cost you more than you had priced it. I said that specifically. I used those specific words." "I know. You looked me in the face and told me the personal cost was manageable." "I know. Is it manageable, Taehyun? Is the personal cost manageable?" He didn't answer. The gray sedan hadn't moved. Jaemin was watching it from a position down the block, staying still, doing what he was good at. "She won't have you back because you've decided to show up," his mother said. "You understand that. This isn't a negotiation she'll enter on those terms." "I know that too. Then what are you doing there?" "Someone threatened her," he said. "CO's people. They want her out of Korea." A silence. Then his mother's voice changed, dropped into something lower, harder, older. Han-mi-ran had been navigating the world his father built for 35 years. She understood threats in ways that were not abstract. What kind of threat? A call, 72 hours to leave. And if she doesn't leave? CO escalates. Another silence. He heard something shift on his mother's end. A chair, movement, the sound of her standing up. "You didn't lose her because another man took her," his mother said. "You need to understand that. There was no competition, no outside force. You lost her because you convinced her, systematically, over time, with your choices and your silences, that she would always come second, that the empire would always come first, that she was the personal cost that was manageable." He had no answer for that. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was so precisely true that any response he formed would have sounded like a defense, and he was tired of defending himself to himself. "She has Seo's attention now," he said, "which means she has no margin for error. And the people around her are not your syndicate," his mother said. "I know. I can't leave her exposed." "Then don't." A pause. "But don't make it about strategy, Taehyun. Don't solve her like a problem. If you go back there, when you go back as a man, not a boss. She's seen enough of the boss." He was quiet for a long moment. The car windows were fully fogged now. He was looking at nothing, just gray, just the particular muffled privacy of a fogged window in a stopped car on a wet Mapo street. "The child," he said. "My child. I didn't—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know how much it would matter until I found out." "That's what children do," his mother said. Not unkindly. They clarify things. She hung up. He sat with the phone in his lap and the fog on the windows and the weight of several conversations pressing down on him at once. Nia at the door, his mother on the line, Dae-wook's quiet efficiency moving around him, the gray sedan sitting patient and watchful at the corner. His phone buzzed. Dae-wook's number. He answered. "The sedan moved," Dae-wook said. "It's heading toward the building." Tae-hyun's hand was on the door handle before Dae-wook finished the sentence. "And there's a second vehicle," Dae-wook said, "coming from the north. They're not reconnaissance anymore." Tae-hyun pushed the door open and stepped into the rain, and it hit him like a wall. Not cold, past cold, into the specific temperature that stops registering as sensation and starts registering as pressure. A full body weight that soaked through his jacket in the first 3 seconds and plastered his shirt to his chest and filled his shoes before he reached the sidewalk. He moved fast, not running. That controlled, purposeful speed he had practiced until it looked like calm. Dae-wook's voice came through the earpiece Jaemin had passed him 20 minutes earlier. "First vehicle is stopping in front of the building. 2 men out. The second vehicle is still moving, coming around the north side to cut the alley." "How many total?" "Minimum 4, possibly 6. 4 to 6 men for 1 pregnant woman in a 4th-floor apartment." The arithmetic of that told him everything about how seriously Seo had decided to take the 72-hour warning, which meant Seo had never expected it to work, had sent the call not as a genuine offer, but as a formality, a box to check before escalation. The call had been the performance. This was the actual intention. Tae-hyun was already at the building entrance when the first 2 men reached the lobby door from the opposite direction. They saw him at the same moment he saw them. A half-second of mutual recognition. Not of faces, but of posture, of the specific way men who work in violence carry themselves, the weight distribution, the particular stillness of hands near bodies. They knew what he was as clearly as he knew what they were. One of them reached inside his jacket. Tae-hyun moved first. He had not been in a physical confrontation in 4 years. His position had long since elevated him past the point where that was expected or necessary. But the body remembers what it learned when it was young and desperate, and what his body remembered was efficient and direct and had nothing decorative about it. The first man went down hard against the lobby wall. The second got his hand on whatever he was reaching for before Tae-hyun closed the distance and made that irrelevant. 12 seconds. Both men on the floor. Tae-hyun's knuckles bleeding from something he hadn't registered happening. "Jaemin," he said into the earpiece, stepping over one of the men and hitting the stairwell door. "Lobby's clear. North alley. Go." "Moving," Jaemin said. He took the stairs 2 at a time. 3rd floor, 4th floor. The hallway, narrow, fluorescent lit, smelling of old cooking and concrete. Unit 412. He ran his eyes across the door, closed. No sound from inside, light visible under the gap at the bottom. He knocked, 3 times. The same rhythm as before. Nothing. "Nia." He kept his voice level, controlled. The thing his mother had said, go as a man, not a boss. "There are men in the building. I need you to open the door right now." A pause that lasted long enough to make his chest tight. Then footsteps. The lock turned. Amani opened the door. She took one look at him, soaked, bleeding hand, a specific expression on his face she apparently found credible, and stepped back without speaking. Nia was standing in the middle of the living room. She had her phone in her hand and her shoes already on, which meant some part of her had understood before he knocked that the night had changed shape. "We need to move," he said. "Where?" she said. "Away from here. Now. I'll explain in the car." "You'll explain now." "Nia, you'll explain now or I'm not moving." She wasn't raising her voice. She was doing the thing she did. The absolute stillness, the complete refusal to be rushed by someone else's urgency. Under any other circumstances, he would have found it almost admirable. Right now, it was costing them seconds he didn't have. "CO sent men," he said. "Not a phone call this time. Actual men. 2 are already down in the lobby. There are at least 2 more in the alley. The building is compromised, and I have 1 operative outside, and I came here with 3 people total because I was an idiot who thought a quiet approach was better. So we do not have the capacity to hold this position, and I need you to trust me for approximately the next 40 minutes, even though I understand completely why that's difficult." She looked at him, the phone in her hand, the shoes on her feet. Amani already moving toward the hall closet, pulling out a bag that had been pre-packed, which told him that Amani, at least, had been operating on the assumption that this moment would come. 40 minutes, Nia said.
Minimum. She looked at Imani. Imani looked back. Something passed between them. The specific compressed communication of two people who have spent enough time together to have developed a private language.
Fine, Naya said. Go. They made the ground floor in 90 seconds. Che Min was at the back entrance, holding it open, scanning the alley with the focused attention of someone who had already cleared it and was now making sure it stayed clear. The two men from the north vehicle were visible at the far end of the alley. On the ground, zip-tied, one of them making sounds that were not language. Che Min had been busy. The car was 30 meters up the side street. They moved fast through the rain. Tae-hyun, with his hand not quite touching Nia's arm, close enough to redirect her if necessary, not so close as to assume contact she hadn't offered. Imani moved beside Nia with her bag on one shoulder and her jaw set in a way that communicated she was operating on pure adrenaline and would be furious about this later, when there was time. Dae-wook had the engine running. They were in and moving before the doors were fully closed. The other vehicle, Taehyun said, repositioned to the main street. They know the building exit was compromised. They'll be calling for backup. Dae-wook was already navigating, threading through the Mapo back streets with the confident precision of a man who had memorized exit routes as a professional habit. We have a window. 10 minutes, maybe 12.
Where are we going? Nia said from the back seat.
Safe house in Yongsan, Dae-wook said. Whose safe house? Ours. That's not reassuring. Dae-wook almost said something, caught himself, kept driving. Taehyun turned in the passenger seat to look at her. She was sitting upright, both hands in her lap, her face carrying the specific tight control of someone managing fear through structure. Her jaw was set, her eyes were clear. She was scared, and she was not allowing it to make her small, and he felt something in his chest that had no clean name for it. Thank you, he said. She looked at him. For what? For opening the door. She turned to look out the window, the rain-blurred streets of Mapo sliding past. Don't thank me yet, she said. I haven't decided what I think about any of this. The Yongsan Safe House was a mid-floor unit in a building that looked like 1,000 other residential buildings in the district. Anonymous, maintained, nothing about its exterior suggesting it was anything other than what it appeared to be. Dae-wook had 3 properties like this across the city, maintained quietly, rotated on irregular schedules, known to no one outside the innermost operational circle. They were inside within 20 minutes of leaving Mapo. Jae-min swept the unit while Dae-wook secured the entrance. Nia and Imani sat in the main room, plain furniture, good sight lines to all entry points, the specific utilitarian comfort of a space designed for function rather than living. Tae-hyun wrapped his hand with a first aid kit from the bathroom. 2 knuckles split. Not deep, nothing structural. He worked the bandage without looking at it, watching the room. Nia was watching him. You knew how to do that, she said. In the lobby. He pulled the bandage tight. Yes. I've never seen you. She stopped. You've never seen a lot of things, he said. Not as a rebuke, just as a fact. She accepted that. Set it somewhere to deal with later. Dae-wook came in from the hallway and closed the door. His face was carrying something. The particular compression of information being held. Information that needed to be delivered and was being timed. Taehyun saw it immediately. What? Dae-wook looked at Nia and Imani. Taehyun understood the look but shook his head. A small, definitive movement. Whatever it was, she would hear it. Dae-wook accepted that with a breath. The intercept from CO's channels. The full transcript came through while we were moving. He held out a phone, the screen showing a message feed, lines of decoded text. There's more to it than the warning call. Taehyun took the phone. Read. His face did nothing. That was the tell. When his face did nothing at all. When all expression was simply evacuated, it meant the information was bad enough that maintaining composure was a conscious act. He read it a second time. Then he set the phone on the table face down and put both hands flat on either side of it and breathed through his nose once, slowly. Talk me through it, he said to Dae-wook. His voice was completely level. That was the other tell. The CO consortium has a source inside the Hanul inner circle, Dae-wook said, has had one for somewhere between 8 and 14 months. The intercept references operational details that were discussed in closed council meetings. Information that could only have come from someone present in those rooms. The room was very quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Who? Taehyun said. We're still analyzing, but the intercept references a contact name. Dae-wook paused, just briefly, just long enough that Taehyun understood the name was going to cost him something before he heard it. The contact name is Woo Jin, Park Woo Jin, who had been with the Hanul Syndicate for 11 years, who had been present at every inter-council meeting for the past 3 years, who had been, until approximately 45 seconds ago, the man Taehyun would have listed among the 4 people in the organization he trusted without reservation, who had been in the room when Taehyun told the inner council that he knew Nia was pregnant, who had been in the room when the decision was made to keep that information contained to the innermost circle, who had apparently walked out of that room and made a phone call. Taehyun's hands were still flat on the table. He was looking at the face-down phone. The bandage on his knuckles was already showing a small dark spot where one of the cuts had pushed through. Woo Jin told Seo about the pregnancy, he said. The timeline fits. Seo's operation against Nia moved within hours of your inner council meeting. He was in that room. Taehyun's voice was very quiet now. He sat in that room and he listened, and then he stopped, picked up the phone, turned it over, read the intercept one more time, because he was a man who needed information to be confirmed through repetition before his response to it was final. Then he set the phone down again. Where is he now? He said.
The estate. He's on duty tonight. Overnight rotation. Don't move on him. Don't alert him. Don't change anything about his environment until I say. His voice had gone flat in a way that had nothing to do with calm. I want him to feel safe until I decide what I'm doing. Dae-wook nodded.
Nia had been watching all of this. She had not spoken since Dae-wook started talking. She was doing that thing, the complete stillness, the full capacity processing, and he was aware of her watching him with the particular attention of someone revising their understanding of a situation in real time. Someone inside your organization told them about the baby, she said. Yes. Someone you trusted. Yes. She looked at him steadily. So this didn't start with the warning call. This started the moment your own people found out. A pause. Which means the moment you found out, the moment Dae-wook told you, you became the source of the threat to me. The accuracy of that was surgical. He didn't flinch from it. Yes, he said. Imani made a sound that was not quite a word. I didn't know, he said. I need you to understand that I didn't know there was a leak. I know you didn't know. Nia's voice was measured, careful. That's not the point. The point is that your world, the structure you built, the people you trusted, they became the mechanism that put me in danger. She paused. This is what I left. This is exactly what I left. He had no clean answer for that, nothing that wouldn't sound like justification, which he had decided he was done producing. I know, he said. Knowing doesn't fix it. No, it doesn't. She stood up, walked to the window and looked out at the Yongsan street below. Different neighborhood, same rain, same city that seemed determined to make this night as long as possible. He watched her back, the set of her shoulders, the way she had one hand pressed flat to her sternum, not clutching, just resting there, in the specific place where the baby was beginning to make itself known. What happens now? She said, to the window. Not to him specifically. Seo's people lost contact with their team in Mapo, Dae-wook said. By morning, they'll know the operation failed. They'll know you didn't leave and that the physical approach was countered. That changes their calculus. Meaning they escalate further, Imani said. Meaning they reassess. Seo is methodical. He won't move again until he understands what changed and why. Dae-wook looked at Taehyun, which gives us a window, small but real. Taehyun had been thinking since the moment Dae-wook said Woo Jin's name. Not reactively, structurally, the way he thought when a problem had enough dimensions that emotion would only narrow the available solutions. Woo Jin. 11 years. Present at every critical decision point for the last 3. If he had been feeding Seo for 8 to 14 months, the intercept's estimated range, then the scope of what had been compromised was significant. Not just the information about the pregnancy. Everything discussed in those rooms. Every alliance under consideration, every vulnerability mapped. Seo had been playing a longer game than Tae-hyun had understood. The alliance negotiation, the political marriage arrangement, those hadn't been a response to Haneul's strength. They had been built on intelligence about Haneul's weaknesses, built on 14 months of a man sitting in closed rooms and remembering everything and walking out and making phone calls. The Seo Consortium hadn't been seeking a merger. It had been preparing an acquisition. The alliance agreement, Tae-hyun said. Dae-wook looked at him. The specific terms Seo pushed hardest for, the succession clauses, the asset transfer triggers, the governance provisions. All of it came after Woo Jin joined the inner council. He was thinking aloud now, not for the room, but for himself, following the thread. Seo designed those terms knowing exactly what our vulnerabilities were, knowing exactly what leverage points to build in. He looked at Dae-wook. If I had signed that agreement, you would have signed away operational control of the Mapo and Yongsan territories within 18 months, Dae-wook said quietly. The succession clauses were written to trigger on any internal leadership dispute. With Woo Jin providing intelligence on internal fracture points, Seo could have engineered a dispute from outside. The room absorbed that. He wasn't trying to merge with us, Tae-hyun said. No. He was going to take us apart from the inside. He put it together completely, all of it, the full architecture of what had been constructed around him while he was negotiating in good faith and making personal sacrifices he'd told himself were strategic necessities. The political marriage was a distraction, a way to keep me focused on the personal cost while the real mechanism was being built into the contract language. And he had almost signed it, had been 2 weeks from signing it, had sacrificed Nia for an alliance that was never an alliance, had put the ring on the counter and walked away from the only thing in his life that wasn't a calculation. And the reason he had done it was a lie told to him by a man who had been sitting in his rooms for over a year and feeding his vulnerabilities to his enemy. He became very still. Nia had turned from the window. She was watching him with an expression that had shifted, the careful distance still present, but something else underneath it now. Something that looked like she was watching a man arrive at a place she had been waiting for him to reach for a long time. You understand now, she said. He looked at her. You understand what it cost, she said. What you gave up. You understand it completely now. He held her gaze. There was nothing to say to that which would not diminish it. So he said, yes. She nodded once. Small, like something being filed. Then Dae-wook's phone lit up. He looked at it. His face did the thing, the microscopic tightening, the small and terrible tells. What? Tae-hyun said. Woo Jin just left the estate, Dae-wook said. He walked out through the east gate 14 minutes ago. He's not answering his phone. A pause. His access codes were used 3 minutes after he left to pull the digital files on the Yongsan safe house locations. The silence was absolute. He knows we're here, Jaemin said from the doorway. Young voice, stating the fact cleanly because someone had to. Tae-hyun looked at Naya. She looked back at him. The rain against the windows, the specific tight quality of air in a room where everyone has just understood simultaneously that the walls they thought were protecting them had already been mapped. Tae-hyun moved before anyone else in the room finished processing it. He was at the window in 4 steps, not looking out, looking at the reflection in the dark glass, the room behind him, the entry points, the distances. His mind was running the geometry automatically. 1 door, 2 windows, 4th floor, stairwell access from both ends of the corridor, elevator visible from the main entrance only. How long since he pulled the files, he said. 17 minutes now, Dae-wook said. Drive time from the estate to this building. 22 minutes, maybe 18 if he pushed it. So we have a window. He turned. Small. Very small. Jaemin was already in the hallway, pulling the door to the unit closed, checking the stairwell. He came back in 10 seconds. Clear, for now. Tae-hyun looked at Nia. She was standing with her arms crossed. Not defensively, but the way someone stands when they are holding themselves together through deliberate physical pressure. Amani was beside her, bag already on her shoulder, shoes on, reading the room with the calm assessment of someone who had worked in enough unstable places to know that panic was a luxury and preparation was not. We can't stay here, Tae-hyun said. Obviously, Nia said. I need you to do exactly what I say for the next 20 minutes. After that, he stopped himself. After that, you can argue with everything, but right now I need 20 minutes. She looked at him for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then, 20 minutes. He nodded once, looked at Dae-wook. The secondary location. Dobong, 40 minutes in this traffic. Get the car to the basement level. Jaemin, you're with me. We take the east stairwell. He was already moving toward the hall closet, pulling out the go bag Dae-wook kept in every safe house. Cash, clean phones, a first aid kit that hadn't been opened yet. 2 sets of ID. He handed the bag to Jaemin. Dae-wook, you take Naya and Amani. East stairwell, basement, car. Don't wait at the car. If I'm not there in 4 minutes, you drive. Dae-wook didn't argue with the logic. And you. I need to make a call from this unit before I leave. He held up a hand before Dae-wook could object. 30 seconds? Then I'm behind you. Dae-wook looked at him with the expression of a man who has spent 30 years calculating acceptable risk and has learned to recognize when arguing is a waste of the time it would take. He turned to Nia and Amani. With me. Now. Nia held Tae-hyun's gaze for exactly 1 second. Something in it, not forgiveness, not trust rebuilt, but something in the vicinity of both. Then she followed Dae-wook. Tae-hyun watched them go. The door closed. He pulled out his phone and made the call he'd been building toward since the moment he heard Woo-jin's name. It rang twice. I was wondering when you'd call, Park Woo-jin said. His voice was completely steady. That was the thing that hit hardest. The steadiness of it. No guilt. No performance of innocence. Just a man who had already moved past the need to pretend. Tae-hyun's hand tightened on the phone. He kept his voice level. How long? 14 months. Why? A pause. Not the pause of someone searching for words. The pause of someone deciding how much truth to give a man who already knows most of it. You were going to lose it anyway, Woo-jin said. Seo had built leverage you couldn't see. I chose the side that was going to be standing when it was over. You could have come to me. And said what? That the man I'd served for 11 years had built something he couldn't hold? You don't hear things like that, Tae-hyun. You've never heard things you didn't want to hear. The accuracy of that did not make it land softer. It made it land harder. Where are you? Tae-hyun said. Close enough. Another pause. I didn't want her hurt. I want you to know that. The woman, I told Director O that physical action was unnecessary. He disagreed. You told them where she was. You told them about the child. I told them what I knew. I didn't direct what they did with it. That's a distinction without a difference, Woo-jin. Silence. The Yongsan unit, Tae-hyun said. You pulled those files. I did. So you know we're here. I do. Then you also know I'm not here anymore. He ended the call. Put the phone in his pocket. Moved to the door, out into the hallway toward the east stairwell. He was on the second-floor landing when the building's power went out. Complete darkness. The kind that had weight. The emergency lighting system kicked in 3 seconds later. Dim red panels along the baseboard. Enough to see shapes but not faces. Enough to navigate but not clearly. He kept moving. First floor. The stairwell door to the basement level. He pushed through it. The basement garage was low-ceilinged and smelled of concrete and exhaust and the specific cold that collected in underground spaces. Dae-wook's car was near the far wall. Engine running, headlights off, Dae-wook behind the wheel. Jaemin materialized from a shadow to Tae-hyun's left, which meant he'd taken a different route and arrived first, which was exactly what Tae-hyun had wanted without having to say it. He reached the car, pulled the passenger door, looked in the back seat. Nia, Imani, both present, both intact. He got in. Go. Dae-wook went. The car came up the ramp and into the street, and Tae-hyun saw them immediately. 2 vehicles, positioned at the building exits, occupants visible as dark shapes through rain-blurred glass. They were expecting the front entrance. They hadn't covered the basement ramp with enough bodies. One of the vehicles moved to intercept. Don't stop, Tae-hyun said. Dae-wook didn't stop. What followed was 40 seconds of controlled chaos through Yongsan's narrow side streets. The pursuing vehicle close, Dae-wook threading gaps that should not have been gaps,
the car's chassis scraping once against a concrete barrier in a sound that made Imani grip the door handle and say something sharp and short in a language Taehyun didn't speak. Nia made no sound at all. He turned once to check. She had both hands braced against the seat back, her face tight with controlled fear, her jaw set, her eyes forward. She was holding together. She was always holding together. The pursuing vehicle fell back at a junction when Dae-wook cut through a bus lane against the signal, and the geography of the intersection made following too costly. 2 more turns. Then the streets were just streets again, wet and empty and gray, the rain still falling with its patient indifference. "Clear," Jaemin said from the back. Dae-wook exhaled through his nose. His hands on the wheel were completely steady. 30 years. "Dobong," Taehyun said. "Dobong," Dae-wook confirmed. The Dobong location was not a safe house. It was a building site, a commercial property Hanul Capital had under development, framed but not enclosed, the upper floors open to the sky, the ground floor sealed with temporary construction hoarding. Dae-wook had 2 men already there, positioned since the Mapo situation had escalated, because Dae-wook planned for contingencies that hadn't been discussed yet. They came in through a contractor's entrance on the north side. The ground floor interior was raw concrete and plastic sheeting and portable work lights on extension cords running from a generator, functional, graceless, entirely defensible. Taehyun's 2 men were positioned at the entry points. Another had eyes on the street from a second-floor opening in the hoarding. Nia sat on a construction crate and looked at the exposed rebar above her head and the plastic sheeting and the work lights throwing yellow shadows across unfinished walls. Then she looked at Taehyun. "Your life," she said. He looked back. "I know. This is your life. This is what you built." She wasn't accusing. She was stating it flatly, the way you state something you have finally seen with full clarity and are naming out loud for the first time. "Yes. I grew up in Lagos," she said. "My father drove a delivery truck. My mother taught primary school. Our house had a tin roof that made a sound like applause when it rained." She paused. "I built a completely different life. I made choices every step of the way to make sure the life I was building was made of something real." She looked at the raw concrete floor. "And then I walked into yours." He sat on the crate across from her, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to give her the space she still needed. "You didn't walk into mine," he said. "I pulled you in. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." He looked at his bandaged hand, the dark spot through the gauze. "You came to a zoning meeting to argue against my interests, and I decided I wanted to know who you were. Everything after that was me choosing you, and then choosing everything else over you, and then sitting in a car in the rain trying to figure out how to undo that." She was quiet for a moment. The generator hummed. Outside, the rain was easing. The first time all night it had shown any sign of stopping. "Imani said I should tell you," Naya said, "about the baby. She said you deserved to know regardless of what you'd done." She paused. "I kept telling her it wasn't about what you deserved. It was about what was safe." "You were right about that." "I know I was." She looked at him. "I'm still right about it. Having your child in your world is not safe. This," she gestured at the construction site around them, "this is evidence." "I know. So what are you asking me?" "I'm not asking you anything tonight." She studied him. "Then what are you doing?" "Tonight I'm keeping you alive," he said. "That's the only thing I'm doing tonight. Everything else—" He stopped. "Everything else I'll ask for when you have the option to say no from a position that isn't a construction site at midnight." Something moved across her face, small. She looked away before he could read it fully. Dae-wook appeared from the stairwell that led to the upper floors. He crossed the space in his economical way and stopped at a distance that was close enough to be private and far enough to be respectful. His face was carrying the compression again. Taehyun felt it before Dae-wook spoke. The specific quality of incoming information. "Jaemin made contact with our man at the Seo building," Dae-wook said. "Director Oh is moving. Not just field operatives this time. He's mobilizing the full enforcement unit." He paused. "And Woo Jin is with them. He's leading them here." "He doesn't know this location," Taehyun said. "He knows our construction holdings. He's been in inner council long enough to know which properties are active."
Another pause. He narrowed it. He's running elimination, checking each site. He'll reach this one. How long? 20 minutes, 30 at most.
Taehyun stood up. The math was simple and bad. 2 men at entry points, one watching the street, Jae-min, Dae-wook himself, against whatever Director O considered a full enforcement unit, which based on Seo's resources meant at minimum 10, more likely 15. 3 to 1. In an unfinished building, in the rain, with Nia behind him. He looked at Dae-wook. The evidence, the intercept transcripts, everything you've been building on Seo's operation.
Compiled, encrypted, sitting on a server that only I have access to. I need it transmittable. Right now, everything. The 14 months of intelligence on Woo Jin, the CO conspiracy documentation, the wire intercepts, the files on the alliance contract manipulation. He looked at his phone. There are 2 numbers I can call. Journalists who have covered organized crime and who have published material that required real sources. If I send them everything simultaneously, it goes public, Dae-wook said. It goes public, all of it. CO's operation, the inside source, the attempted cover-up. All of it hits simultaneously, and the moment it does, moving against Nia becomes the worst possible strategic decision because it puts CO directly in the frame for what happens to her. Dae-wook considered this for approximately 2 seconds. It also exposes the syndicate. I know. It exposes your personal situation, the child, everything. I know.
There is no walking this back once it's sent. I know. He met Dae-wook's eyes. Do it. Dae-wook looked at him for a moment, not questioning the decision, but marking it. 30 years of service, and he was watching the man he'd watched grow from a 27-year-old inheriting an empire make the first choice Dae-wook had ever seen him make that couldn't be explained by strategy. Then he pulled out his phone and started working. Nia had heard everything. She was standing now, watching Tae-hyun with an expression he couldn't fully decode. Too many things layered in it, too much that would take time and distance to separate out. You're burning the alliance, she said. Yes. You're burning everything you spent the last 18 months building. Yes. Because of me. He looked at her directly. Because it was built on a lie, and it was going to hollow out everything I actually had, and because someone threatened my child. He paused. In that order. Imani, from her position against the far wall, said nothing, but she set her bag down, which meant something. The specific body language of someone deciding they were staying. Then the man on the second floor called down. His voice was controlled, professional. The voice of someone trained to deliver bad news without escalating it. Vehicles on the street, he said. 3 of them, coming slow. Taehyun turned to Dae-wook. How long on the transmission? 4 minutes. We need 4 minutes. Yes. He looked at Jae-min, at the 2 men at the entry points, at Dae-wook, with his phone and his 30 years, at the unfinished building around them, concrete and rebar and plastic sheeting and the specific terrible openness of a structure that wasn't meant to be defended. Then he heard the vehicles stop outside, heard doors, heard footsteps, and then Woo Jin's voice, coming through the construction hoarding, aimed at the building with the particular carrying quality of a man who has decided pretense is no longer useful. Tae-hyun. Clear, calm, almost conversational. I know you're in there. Director O has 12 men. You have 6, including yourself. The math isn't something you can strategy your way out of. A pause. Send the woman out. Send her out and her friend, and let them walk. Then we settle this between us. Taehyun looked at Nia. She shook her head. A small, definitive motion. Not scared. Decided. He turned back to the hoarding. He walked toward the entry point and stopped at the edge of the light, just inside the threshold where he was visible but not exposed, and he spoke at a volume that carried. 3 minutes, Woo Jin, he said. Give me 3 minutes and then we'll talk. A pause from outside. 3 minutes for what? For me to decide what kind of man I'm going to be. Silence. The rain had almost fully stopped. The wet street outside caught the light from somewhere and turned it silver. Taehyun could hear breathing, his own, controlled. The men around him, focused, and from behind him, Nia's, which was even and deliberate, the breathing of a woman who had decided she was not going to be afraid in this building tonight. Behind him, Dae-wook said, 2 minutes. Outside, 12 men waited in the silver-lit street. Inside, the generator hummed.
Taehyun stood at the threshold between the two and felt the weight of everything he had built pressing against the weight of everything he had nearly lost. And he understood with complete clarity that the version of himself that had made the choice, the ring on the counter, the alliance, the empire over the person, that version of himself was standing in this building for the last time. Whatever came through that door in 2 minutes would be met by a man who had already decided what mattered. Transmission complete, Dae-wook said. Taehyun turned from the threshold. Dae-wook held up the phone. The send confirmation on the screen, 2 recipients, everything, every intercept, every decoded communication. 14 months of Woo Jin's betrayal. The full architecture of Seo Kyung-chul's conspiracy laid out in documented detail, and now sitting in the inboxes of 2 journalists who had spent careers waiting for exactly this kind of material. It was done. It could not be undone. He turned back to the hoarding. Woo Jin? Silence from outside. It's sent, Taehyun said. Everything. Seo's operation, the intelligence feeding, the contract manipulation, the attempts against Naya. All of it. 2 journalists have it right now. He paused. You have about 4 hours before it publishes. Maybe less. Another pause. Director O should know that moving against anyone in this building in the next 4 hours is the worst decision he will ever make, because his name is in those files, and whatever happens to us becomes the headline that runs directly above his photograph. Silence from the street. The specific quality of men recalculating. Then Woo Jin's voice, and for the first time, something in it that hadn't been there before. Not panic, something more controlled than panic and more honest than composure. Something that sounded like a man arriving at the end of a road he had started down 14 months ago and finding it shorter than he expected. You burned everything, Woo Jin said. Yes. The syndicate, the alliance, all of it. All of it. A long silence. Taehyun could hear the street sounds. Water still running in the gutters. A distant siren somewhere in Yongsan. The particular post-rain stillness of a city that has been washed and not yet dried. Then footsteps. One set. Coming toward the construction entrance. Dae-wook moved. Taehyun held up a hand. One finger. Wait. Woo Jin came through the hoarding gap alone. He was in his coat, soaked from the street, his hands visible and empty. He stopped 6 feet inside the threshold and looked at Taehyun across the concrete floor and the work lights throwing yellow light between them. He looked older than he had at the council meeting 3 days ago. Or maybe Taehyun was just seeing him clearly for the first time, without the filter of 11 years of assumed loyalty softening every detail into familiarity. Park Woo Jin. 41 years old. Joined Hanoul at 30. Had carried things for Taehyun's father before he carried them for Taehyun. Had been in rooms where decisions were made that could not be unmade. Had watched, apparently, and calculated, and decided, 14 months ago, quietly, in the specific privacy of a man who has decided that the future belongs to someone else. Director O is pulling back, Woo Jin said. I told him the math changed. I know it changed, Taehyun said. You knew it changed before he did. That's why you came in alone. Woo Jin looked at him. Something in his face that was not quite guilt and not quite its absence. Something in between. The expression of a man who has rationalized a decision for so long that the original moral weight of it has become archaeological, buried, compressed, occasionally surfacing as pressure without a clear source. What do you want from me? Woo Jin said. Right now? Nothing. Taehyun kept his voice even. Not cold. He had spent enough years performing cold to know the difference between the performance and the actual temperature. This was just flat. Just honest. You made your choice. I made mine. The files are out. Whatever happens to Seo, to his operation, to the alliance, that's already in motion and neither of us controls it anymore. Woo Jin absorbed that. His jaw moved slightly. And me. You walk out of this building, Taehyun said, and then you make yourself very small and very quiet for a very long time. Because when those files publish, your name is in them. Not prominently. I could have made it prominent and I chose not to. But it's there. What investigators do with it is their business, not mine. You're letting me go.
I'm letting you leave. He held Wu Jin's gaze. Those aren't the same thing.
Wu Jin stood there for another moment, looking at Tai Hyun with the expression of a man who had prepared for several versions of this conversation and had not prepared for this one. Then he nodded. Once, small, the acknowledgement of a man who understands he has received something he didn't earn, and turned and walked back through the hoarding gap and into the street. Taehyun listened to his footsteps fade. Then he turned around. Nia was watching him from across the concrete floor. Her arms were at her sides now, not crossed, not braced, just at her sides, open. Why, she said, Wu Jin, why let him go? Because destroying him doesn't fix anything. He walked back toward her. And I'm tired of destroying things. Director O pulled his unit back before dawn. The files published at 6:14 in the morning. Both journalists simultaneously coordinated, the kind of release designed to make suppression impossible. By 7, it was on 3 major news aggregators. By 8, the SEO Consortium's legal team had issued the first of what would become 11 public statements over the following week, each one progressively less confident than the last. Seo Kyung-chul himself said nothing publicly for 4 days. When he did speak, it was through lawyers, in language so hedged it functioned as a kind of negative space. Every denial shaped precisely around the things that couldn't be denied, which told the people reading it exactly what they needed to know. The criminal investigation opened inside a week. It would run for 14 months and end with the SEO Consortium's operational leadership facing charges across 3 jurisdictions. The political alliance, the merger that had been designed as an acquisition, collapsed entirely. The succession clauses SEO's lawyers had built so carefully into the agreement were never triggered, because the agreement was never signed, because the man who had been about to sign it had driven across Seoul in the rain instead. Park Woo-jin disappeared from Seoul within 48 hours of leaving the construction site. He resurfaced, 18 months later, in a different country under circumstances that were not publicized. His name appeared in the investigation files as a secondary figure, significant but not central, the way Tae Hyun had arranged it. Whether that was mercy or strategy or some entanglement of both, Tae Hyun didn't spend much time examining. He had other things to examine. The Hanuel syndicate underwent what the financial press called a significant restructuring. What it actually underwent was the slow, deliberate process of a man deciding which parts of what he had built he was willing to keep and which parts he was not. The legitimate holdings, Hanuel Capital, the real estate portfolio, the logistics operation, survived and in some respects strengthened, freed from the gravitational pull of the alliance negotiations. The rest contracted. Not collapsed, contracted. Pulled back to a smaller perimeter, a cleaner shape, the kind of organization that could be managed without requiring every room to be a war room. Taehyun did not announce any of this. He made decisions and implemented them quietly, the way he had always made decisions, and the people who needed to know understood what was happening, and the people who didn't need to know saw only that the feared head of Hanuel was less visible in the circles where he had previously been constant. Some people interpreted this as weakness. Those people, uniformly, were wrong. 6 weeks after the construction site, on a morning in early spring when Seoul was doing what it occasionally did between the cold and the heat, producing a sky so clear it looked edited, the light falling at an angle that made ordinary things look briefly significant, Tae Hyun drove himself to a park along the Han River. No driver, no Dae-wook, no Jae-min at a discreet distance, just himself in a car and the specific vulnerability of a man who has decided that arriving with an entourage to ask for something personal is its own kind of cowardice. She was already there, sitting on a bench near the water's edge, her coat open despite the lingering chill, watching the river move. She had known he was coming. He had asked, formally, through a message she had taken 3 days to respond to, and when she responded, she had given him a time and a place and nothing else. He sat on the bench beside her, not close, far enough that the choice of distance was clearly hers to close if she chose. The Han River moved the way it always moved, patient, enormous, indifferent to everything happening on its banks. A rowing team was out on the water, 8 figures moving in the synchronized rhythm of people who have practiced something together long enough that they no longer have to think about it. Neither of them spoke for a while. That had always been something they could do. Sit in quiet, without it being hostile. It was one of the first things he had noticed about her in the early weeks, that her silence was never aggressive, never a weapon, never a test. It was just silence. It meant what it was. "How are you feeling?" he said, finally. She put one hand on her stomach, a gesture she had probably stopped noticing she made. 18 weeks, she said. She moves now, at night mostly. He looked at her hand on the curve of her coat. Something happened in his chest. Not the complicated thing, not the layered adult thing with all its guilt and history. Something simpler, something that hadn't existed in him 6 weeks ago because he hadn't known to make room for it. "She," he said. Nia looked at him sideways. "The clinic confirmed it last week." A daughter. He sat with that for a moment. Let it be what it was without reaching for it. "I brought something," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket. The ring. Her ring. The one that had been on the kitchen counter for 46 days now. The one he had picked up that first night and put in his pocket because he hadn't known what else to do with it, and carrying it had felt, in some inarticulate way, like a refusal to accept the full reality of what he'd done. He held it in his palm between them. She looked at it. Her face was unreadable in the way it got when she was feeling something specific and had not yet decided whether to show it. "I'm not giving it back to you," he said. "That's not why I brought it." He looked at the ring in his palm. Small. Gold. The particular weight of a thing chosen carefully. "I brought it because I've been carrying it for 6 weeks, and I don't know what the right thing to do with it is. And I've decided that's something I need to tell you, rather than decide on my own." She looked at the river. "I don't have a speech," he said. "I've written a few. They were all—" He stopped. "They were all arguments. Well-constructed reasons why you should believe things about me. And I've come to understand that the last thing you need from me is another argument." He closed his fingers around the ring. "What I have instead is a fact. I chose wrong. I knew I was choosing wrong when I did it. I told myself the wrongness was manageable, and I was wrong about that too." He looked at her profile, the clean line of her jaw, the particular set of her mouth when she was listening without performing it. "And I have a question, which I will ask once and not repeat." She turned to look at him. "Not today," he said. "Not for a long time, probably. But eventually, when you're ready, when you've had enough time to decide what you actually want rather than what makes sense under pressure, will you tell me if there's a version of this that includes me? Not the syndicate, not the empire. Me." He paused. "As a father first, and then as whatever else you decide I've earned the right to be." The river moved. The rowing team had reached the far bend and turned. 8 figures now moving back in the direction they'd come from, their oars lifting and falling in the cold morning light. Nia was quiet for a long time, long enough that he understood she was not performing consideration. She was actually in it, actually moving through the question with the same complete attention she gave everything. "Imani thinks I should be angrier than I am," she said finally. "Imani's probably right. She usually is." The corner of her mouth moved. Almost. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to one. "I am angry. I want you to know that. I'm not— This isn't me saying it's fine. It's not fine. What you did hurt me in a way that doesn't have a clean word for it." She looked at him directly. "But I've been sitting with it for 6 weeks in a friend's apartment, and then in a safe house in Dobong, and then in a hotel room that Imani paid for because I refused to let you cover it. And I've come to understand something." He waited. "I'm more angry at myself than I am at you," she said, "because I saw it, the whole time. I saw you choosing the empire over the person, and I stayed, and I told myself it was love, and it was, but it was also—" She stopped, organized something, continued. "It was also me deciding that being loved imperfectly by someone extraordinary was better than the alternative, and that was my choice. A bad one. Mine." He wanted to say she was wrong. He stopped himself because she wasn't wrong. And telling her she was wrong was exactly the kind of thing a man said when he wanted to absorb someone else's accountability to make himself feel better. "Okay," he said. She looked at him. "Okay. You're right." She blinked, as if she had been braced for something else, and the absence of it required adjustment. "That's all?" What else would I say? She looked at the river, something shifted in her shoulders, not relaxing exactly, but releasing. The specific physical change of a body that has been carrying attention and has found, unexpectedly, that it's no longer necessary. I need time, she said. I know. I need to have her and recover and figure out what my life looks like. I need that to be my process, not one that's organized around your timeline or your guilt. Yes, and you need to be present, not managing, not providing, present. She paused. There's a difference. I know the difference, he said. I'm still learning how to live it, but I know the difference. She looked at the ring in his closed hand. Keep it, she said, for now. Don't do anything with it, just... She stopped. Just keep it. He closed his hand around it. Okay. They sat in the spring morning by the Han River for a while longer, not speaking, not needing to. The city moved around them in its permanent, restless way. Joggers on the path, cyclists, a woman pushing a stroller with the focused efficiency of someone who has internalized the route. Ordinary, unremarkable. The specific, beautiful ordinariness of a world that does not pause for personal crisis and does not wait for people to catch up. Their daughter was born on a Thursday in late summer. The hospital was private, quiet, chosen for discretion and competence in equal measure. Imani was there. Had been there through 9 hours of labor, steady and present in the way that was simply who she was. Taehyun arrived at hour 3 when Nia had asked for him. Not because everything was resolved, not because the future had been decided, because she asked, and he came, and that was the beginning of the version of himself he was building. He stayed in the corner of the room at first, out of the way, letting the people who knew what they were doing do what they knew. He watched Nia work through something that required more from the body than he had ever been asked to give from his. And he understood something in those hours that no amount of power or resource or strategic intelligence could have taught him. That the kind of strength that actually mattered was not the kind he had spent 17 years cultivating. The baby arrived at 4:17 in the afternoon in the specific golden-edged light of a late Seoul summer, and the sound she made, the first sound, the one that was not yet language, that was simply the announcement of a self entering the world, did something to him that he had no architecture for. He held her 12 minutes after she was born. Nia watched him from the bed, exhausted and present, tracking his face with the careful attention she gave everything. He held the baby, his daughter, this small, complete person who weighed almost nothing and whose fingers were curled against his chest like question marks. And he did not say anything for a long time. He just held her and breathed and let the full weight of the life he had almost chosen wrongly settle into him and stay there. When he finally looked up, Nia was still watching him. "She has your mouth," he said. Nia looked at the baby. Something moved across her face, complicated and tired and real. "She has your stubborn face." "That's going to be a problem," he said. Nia almost laughed. Didn't quite get there. Got close enough that it counted. On. The months moved the way months do when something new is in the house, demanding the entire shape of daily life reorganize around it. Taehyun learned things he had never expected to need to know. The specific pitch of a cry that meant hunger versus the one that meant discomfort. The precise angle required to burp someone who weighed less than his laptop. The particular silence of 3 in the morning in a room with a sleeping infant that was unlike any other silence he had ever sat in. He showed up. That was the thing. The simple, unglamorous, non-strategic thing. He showed up. He was present for the unremarkable hours, not just the significant ones. He drove at night when the baby wouldn't settle, navigating Seoul's empty streets at 2 and 3 in the morning with his daughter in the car seat behind him, the city sliding past the windows in its nocturnal quiet. And he understood something about the city he had spent his adult life running that he had never understood before. It was just a place. Buildings and streets and people trying to manage their lives. He had made it into a kingdom because he needed something to be the size of what he felt, and what he felt had always been larger than what he had let himself want. Nia moved back into the Hanuel estate when the baby was 2 months old. Not into the same rooms. Not on any terms that were implicit or assumed. Explicitly, clearly, on a set of terms she articulated and he accepted without negotiation. Her space was hers. Her decisions about her work, She had gone back to legal consulting, part-time, for the nonprofit in Mapo that she had never entirely left, were hers. The future of what they were to each other would be determined by what they actually built in the day-to-day, not by romantic gestures or speeches or guilt transformed into grand acts. He accepted every condition. He accepted them not because he was performing acceptance, but because he understood finally, at the cellular level, that there was no version of having what he wanted that didn't involve becoming the kind of man who deserved it. And becoming that man was not a declaration. It was not an event. It was a long, unspectacular practice that had to happen in the ordinary hours, in the moments that nobody was watching, in the choices made when there was no strategic advantage to making them. He made those choices, one at a time, without announcement. On an evening in early winter, when Seoul had pulled on its cold and the Han River had gone dark, and the city lights had begun their nightly conversation with the low clouds, Taehyun stood beside a nursery window and watched his daughter sleep. She slept the way she did everything, completely, with her full self, her small fists unclenched for once, her breath slow and even in the blue-gray light from the window. She had her mother's mouth and his stubborn brow, and something entirely her own in the particular determined quality of even her sleep, as if she was accomplishing something. He heard Nia's footsteps in the hall. She appeared at the nursery door, looked at him, looked at the baby, and came to stand beside him at the window. She was close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. Not touching, just present. They watched their daughter sleep. Daewoo called, Nia said quietly, not to disturb the sleeping child. The final indictment on Seo came down. I heard. The consortium is done? Effectively. The successor entities are fighting over the assets. It'll be in courts for years. He paused. It's over. She nodded, small, filed it. And the syndicate, she said. Smaller than it was, cleaner. He looked at the baby. I've been thinking about what it looks like in another 10 years. Whether it's something she inherits or something I've wound down far enough by then that she has an actual choice. She gets a choice, Nia said. Not a request, a statement. She gets a choice, he said. That's not negotiable. Nia looked at him sideways. The nursery light caught the edge of her face. Tired, present, real. No version of this was simple. He understood that and had stopped wanting it to be. I put the ring in the top drawer of the dresser, she said. In my room. He looked at her. I'm not saying anything about it, she said quickly. I'm not making a declaration. She stopped, looked at the baby. I stopped carrying it with me 3 weeks ago, and I put it somewhere I know where it is. That's all. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said, don't make it into something. I'm not making it into anything. Good. They were quiet. The baby made a small sound in her sleep, something between a sigh and a word, the language of dreams too young to have content, just the sound of a self processing its first weeks of existence. Then the sound stopped, and the breathing resumed, and the nursery was still again. Outside the window, Seoul extended in every direction, its towers and its rivers and its bridges and its million lit windows, and the particular cold beauty of a city that had been remade many times and would be remade again, and did not particularly care about any individual story happening within it. It was just a city, just a place where people lived their complicated lives and tried to get things right, and sometimes managed it and sometimes didn't. He had been afraid of it once, afraid that without the city's fear of him he would dissolve, that the power was not something he held but something that held him together, and without it he would find there was nothing underneath. He had been wrong about that too. He was standing in a room with his sleeping daughter and the woman he had loved badly and was learning to love better, and Seoul spread out before him full of its indifferent light, and he was not afraid of any of it. He was just present, which was the only thing that had ever actually been asked of him, and the last thing he had learned to give. The city's lights held their quiet conversation with the winter clouds. His daughter breathed her even breath, and Nia stood beside him at the window, not close and not far, and the distance between them was no longer the shape of what had been broken. It was the shape of what was still being built, which was enough. For tonight, it was more than enough.